Gematria, Illuminati, Secret Society, Chaos Code, Prophecy, Saturn Cult, 27 Club, latest project. Ladies and gentlemen, do I have a treat for you? Tonight we have Jeff Young and Zachary Hubbard with us. Now, I've had multiple requests to get Zach on the show, and the way that this was all put together yesterday, in my opinion, it is definitely meant to be. We had Douglas on a few days ago. Douglas reached out to Jeff, and then Jeff reached out to me, and now this is all being put together for you, the listeners at Leak Project. You guys, it's a real honor to speak with you. How the heck are you?
Doing great.
This is Jeff, and I'm quite festive. Zach and I just did a radio show last evening on Music Without Boundaries, so I think we're all warmed up for you this morning.
Great. You know, I just got done listening to that interview, and it was almost 3 hours, and I was just on edge the entire time. You guys definitely have a way to present information to the table. Now, Zach, I found out about you a few months ago because I was getting requests to have you on the show, and I listened to some of your work, and the way that you broke down names to numbers and symbology and patterns, I find that quite incredible. You've definitely got a knack for that. Jeff, if you would, real quick also for our audience, you were with Megadeth for a while, huge fan, and please give our listeners just a little taste into what your life was like back then and where you're at now.
Well, the most appropriate thing for our discussion, you know, related to Megadeth is if your truth-seeking listeners want to just Google the Megadeth discography and look at the album covers, because there's a ton of predictive programming there. And if you start with the album covers and then you want to dive deeper into the lyrics, you know, all the way back to Peace Sells But Who's Buying, you know, So Far So Good So What, the album I played on, Vic Rattlehead on the cover looks quite akin to how we're seeing the police dressing in their new UN One World Order police garb as of late, and all the way through their latest album, Dystopia, which is totally 1984 Orwellian. But, you know, just from an experiential standpoint, I'm a pretty, at the time I was pretty green. You know, I grew up in Dayton, Ohio, inspired by all the musicians from that state and my city directly. You know, the Ohio Players were from Dayton, Zap Band. Rick Derringer was close by. Chrissy Hine from Columbus or Cleveland, I believe. And I'd been locked in my room practicing, you know, 4 to 14 hours a day, you know, since I picked up the guitar, and I was a musician my whole life. So between doing a radio show as a kid in my bedroom and playing musician, I was pretty green. So to move out to Hollywood and attend Musicians Institute, and 4 years later, you know, circumstances led me to that opportunity. So it was very much like the male version of Dorothy and Toto in The Wizard of Oz, except I was talking to my guitar. My guitar was Toto, so...
That's incredible. And to where you are now, we were speaking yesterday. I said, you know, I slept in. You said, hey, I usually get up early. I said, wow, I didn't know rock stars do that. You said, I'm the anti-rock star. And I thought about that, and I'm looking at what you're doing as far as looking for the truth, bringing people like Zach on your show, and really trying to expose agendas that you feel are important, and I can certainly see why. And so I think that kind of resonated with me when you said anti-rock star, because if you really think about that deeply, man, I'll tell you, the lifestyle of somebody in that industry, the rich and famous rock stars, I look at the 27 Club, people that had such a powerful impact on society, and at the age of 27, bang, they're toast. These weird deaths and circumstances, I'm sure we'll get into that. But do you feel like when you saw those albums, were there handlers essentially? I mean, were there people behind the scenes like in suits that said, okay, you need to take that line out and add this line because it's going to meet our agenda? Or did it all just kind of happen because of maybe something behind the scenes, like a spiritual influence or a demonic, I guess you could say, or both, all of the above?
You got to keep in mind that when I was in the band, this is like 88, 89 and a little beyond. And we were all a lot more naive. And you can obviously go back, you can go all the way back to, you know, books like 1984 and Childhood's End, etc. And it's always been there, but within our band, there was no discussion of it. There was no awareness of it. If anyone was aware, it would have been the leader of that band, if you know what I'm saying. And at the time, he was so inebriated and intoxicated, I don't think he was aware there was no handlers around at the time. But in hindsight, you know, all your listeners have to do is go on YouTube and Google Dave Mustaine, Alex Jones. Those two are pretty tight mates this day and age, like vacationing buddies, close. So that's to be of concern, at least from where I sit. But you know, those two alone in a room together, no good could come from that.
Now, I also find it interesting. I do remember also, it seemed like a couple years ago, didn't he go on Alex's show? And then I haven't really kept track of Alex Jones since then because I've been doing my own thing. I mean, once in a while his stuff will pop up. But, you know, one of the things I've also noticed in the alternative news community is you have to really wonder what certain people's agendas are. And I do my best personally here at the Leak Project to be as neutral as possible. As a journalist, I just want to give the audience a chance to make the decisions for themselves. I mean, I've got things that I'm passionate about, and I speak about that at length sometimes. But really, it seems like you have to be so careful now who to trust. And when you see people out there that tend to push certain agendas a lot and don't come up with solutions, it can certainly make you question things. And you know, Zach, when I was listening to the interview that you had last night with Jeff on his program, and you guys were getting into the false flags, the numbers, the dates, the names, I thought to myself, this is almost so finely orchestrated that could this be some type of system where they've got a computer program, a supercomputers, and it's connected to the media, and they know what it all means. So they put in these certain scenarios that they want to happen, and then all of a sudden, bang, there's this fake false flag at this specific date that equates to this certain equation that they're throwing in our face, etc.
I think your theory or speculation is probably correct. The supercomputer and plotting things out that way. And I have a feeling that a lot of these things that are plotted out, they've been plotted out for many decades in advance, and we're living out an ongoing agenda each day.
Do you think that maybe the computer has taken over? Like there's some type of AI system interface or whatever that's literally now controlling us, similar to the Matrix?
Sure, it very well could be. I mean, that's what the movie essentially Space Odyssey 2001 was, that came out in 1968, the same year 911 was made the national emergency dialing code, the same year World Trade Center construction began, same year George W. Bush graduated from Yale in Skull and Bones, same year MLK was assassinated, Bobby Kennedy.
Let's get into that. Do you think these numbers can be used for good and bad? Or when you look at specific events and particular numbers, do you look at just the negative, or, you know, because it seems like we're in this dualistic universe, right? You've got the yin and the yang. And I wonder sometimes if these numbers and dates are being taken over by these, you know, sociopaths or psychopaths for their agendas. But at the beginning of time, those numbers could have been used for good and bad.
Yeah, absolutely. You said it well again. I mean, this world is all about duality, and I think with all of these numbers, there's a good and a bad side. In my research, I'm mostly exposing the wrongdoers, so I focus on the negative side, and I get a lot of questions like, oh my gosh, I decoded my own name and I have this number, and I say, well, look, that's not a bad thing. Don't worry. I'm just showing how these people are using these numbers routinely in their negative propaganda. But just because your name sums to that or you have that birth numerology, it's not a negative quality towards yourself.
Right. That's a good way to put it. Absolutely. I could appreciate that. And how did you get into this, man? Because you've definitely got a knack for it, Zach. I mean, you break these things down like a computer, literally like a supercomputer.
Well, these people are so repetitive, so that's why I can do it so efficiently now. Like 15 minutes before I jumped on the radio, I turned on CNN and I saw that there was another bombing in Germany, so I decoded it on my blog in about 3 minutes flat, and I made a video in another 10 minutes, and I popped on for the radio show just in time. So, you know, I've become really efficient at this because I've been doing it for 3 years, but how I discovered it was essentially just looking for the truth for more than a decade. And, you know, I was 18 years old when September 11th happened, and I saw it as bogus propaganda, a lie from the moment it was presented. And ever since that day, I've been trying to figure out what the truth is of our media. Because even before September 11th happened, I didn't like the media. I saw it as negative, as fear-mongering, as something not worth watching. All you were going to get from it is some anxiety at best, worried about some new illness or threat out there. So anyway, I've always watched the news with a skeptical eye, trying to see what they're really up to, how they're really contriving their news stories. And over the years of just paying attention to the news, I noticed how often numbers such as 33 and 47 were shown in stories. A shooter's age is 47, or this person was killed and they were 47, or this shooter was 33 years old. Just from looking at the news and the reporting, I noticed this pattern for years, and I thought, what is it with these numbers? What are these numbers all about? And, you know, just doing other research, reading books, gathering knowledge. From the time of September 11th on, I turned into truly a book nerd, a researcher trying to figure out more and more truth about this world and who's running things and what's really going on here. And so I learned about Freemasonry along the way, and I learned about things such as Euclid's 47th problem, which is important to the Freemasons for how to build a structure and establish a foundation. So I started to say, oh, okay, there's things to the number 47. Well, it was around the time of the Sandy Hook shooting that they kept putting up that picture of Adam Lanza with that anorexic face and that crazy shaggy haircut, and they kept reporting that he was 112 pounds, and I kept thinking, why does it matter that he was 112 pounds? And that sounds awfully bizarre. What man is 112 pounds? I mean, that is a really frail man, and they're saying he was toting around all these weapons with his 112-pound body?
Oh, well, yeah, he was so blasted out of his mind that he was not only able to take out all those people in the theater by himself, smash down a door from the outside by himself, but also heavily booby-trap his apartment, all while he was just completely blasted out of his mind.
Well, sure. I think you might have confused James Egan Holmes there, which is another one. Adam Lanza is the
right.
Sandy Hook shooter. James Egan Holmes is the Aurora shooter.
Thank you for correcting
me. Yeah, exactly. It's the same thing, you know. And so
it's hard to keep track. There's so many by now.
Right. We've been bombarded with so many of these stories and crazy-looking shooters. And anyhow, I was just trying to do all this research to figure out, like, okay, if they're making up these stories and they're giving us phony pictures and they're giving us bogus names, is there some ritual to this? Is there something about names I don't know? Is there something about names and numbers? So just in doing these searches, trying to find answers, just one day the word gematria popped up, and I said, oh, what's that? I never heard of that word. So I read a little bit about gematria, and I said, this is pretty interesting. And when I applied it to the Sandy Hook news story, I saw right away that Sandy Hook equaled 112, like the supposed weight of this shooter. And so I read a little bit more about 112, and I saw that 112 was the alt dialing code for 911, and I thought, that's interesting, you know, 911, 112, the nation that had September 11th. The majority of the countries in this world use 112 for their emergency dialing code. This past year in Turkey on January 12th, they had the big bombing there, and you saw on TV all the vehicles driving around with the 112 on the side of them. Anyway, so this is how I stumbled onto gematria, just research and looking for answers and maybe even a little bit of dumb luck that the word came across. And once I found it and began to apply it, the rest is history, because I realized in record time that this was no coincidence and this really is what was being done to us with all of our propaganda news stories.
Absolutely, and I'm glad you brought up the correction there on James Holmes. Thank you. It's funny because I remember that event too, where there was a music video by Lil Wayne that came out prior to or previous to that, where he portrayed, it was either 12 or 13 skeletons in a movie theater, and he was jumping around in there. And at 3 minutes and 42 seconds of the video, if you listen to that, he says "going deaf," and it almost sounds like he says "gun death," in my opinion. So I was wondering, man, is there some type of pre-programming there? Because the amount of skeletons in that theater correlates to the amount of people that were supposedly killed in the theater, correct?
Right. Absolutely. And that's how they do it. I mean, they're running the show. They run entertainment, they run media, they run government, and they love to give us their predictive programming for what they're going to do next.
Jeff, do you think that this is done also to create some type of energy, that maybe there's some type of force that literally feeds off of it, similar to a battery getting charged in the electric socket?
They, quote unquote, for sure feed off negativity. It's an energetic thing. I mean, everything is energy, and one of their favorite things is tears and sorrow. That's why they love to portray that and award that with Oscars in their films. And that's why they love to shove it all over their televisions, the idiot box. For
programming.
It's a weapon. The TV is a weapon. And we, you know, I mean, I'm sure we'll get into the police and the useless military industrial complex, but in their eyes, and this is what folks don't get, is, and it's stated and signed off on by, you know, the powers that be, we're enemies of the state, and whatever they got to do, whatever the means. And that's where the Luciferianism comes in, because that, I mean, what that is at the end of the day is it's ego and narcissism on full blast, on steroids, right?
Well, and when you say they, it seems like there's obviously a very small percentage that controls the majority of the events that take place. I've broken down, there's literally 6 corporations that control over 90% of the media, the television, like you said, the programming. But I wonder if it goes even deeper than the people on this planet. I mean, is there something controlling them? I've researched into the archons and different types of technologies that can be used to affect certain people, and obviously the possessions, and you can bring religion into it or not. It really doesn't matter. There's all different types there. But do you guys think that there could be maybe something even beyond the people controlling the scenes right now? And if so, when you say they, who is they? Are you referring to the people or the machine behind them controlling them?
When I say they, I'm talking shadow government, and who we don't want to forget, because I've been studying this. And Zach, you even mentioned this a few videos ago, and I was happy to see you mention that. Obviously, Freemasons and Zionists, but behind them, and people don't talk enough about the Jesuit and what the role of. And you just brought up religion and. Right there, those three, who else could it be? It's like Zach said on the show last night, you can point fingers every which way and they all end up pointing in those three directions. And again, look, if you want to find out who they are, find out who you can't talk about.
Now, Zach, are you looking at it that way as well, or would you add another level to that also, or is that just kind of too woo-woo to think about that outside of those three realms?
Well, to me, nothing's too woo-woo to think about. We, the people of this world, are living in the dark. We've been lied to our whole lives. And it's entirely possible that there's some sort of greater power, greater influence, possibly from even outside of this world, that truly is in control of the ship, if you will. When you ask who is they, the word they has a major clue in it. The word they has the same gematria as Freemasonry. They sums to 58, like Freemasonry, like calendar, like Gregorian, like secret society. For those who missed my interview last night with Jeff, I talked about how the Freemason Lodge right next to the Burlington Mall where the shooting happened on Friday evening, how it's on Warner Street, and Warner Street equals 58, just like Freemasonry, just like secret society, right where the lodge is. So who they is very clear. It is the Freemasons. But is there something, that's of a higher power even above the Freemasons? It's entirely possible, because at the end of the day, it seems that the people who are ruling over us have absolutely no care for humanity. And, it's just, if they are human, it would be something to find out how they became to be as evil and sick and as tyrannical as they are. So are they something other than human? Possibly.
I want to just illustrate a point here or highlight something Zach said, because folks might know he's in Seattle. So he was, you were 50 miles and you went to the mall, and then you ended up, okay, the mall's closed down. Let me go check out the local Freemason Lodge so we can talk more about that, because you found some major clues that link back to 9/11 on your little field trip that probably surprised even you, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. We can talk about that. The firm that built the World Trade Centers on September 11th, or not on September 11th, the firm that built the World Trade Centers that came crashing down on September 11th, that firm was out of Seattle, Washington, which is just south of Burlington by about 50 miles. And I mentioned at the beginning of the show, 1968 was the year, 33 years before 2001. Remember, false flag in gematria equals 33. 1968, there's a plaque on this lodge up in Burlington that was put there on the date 1968, May 18th, a date that's written 18/5 in most parts of the world. And 18/5 is a lot like the number 185. World Trade Center in gematria sums to 185. Just after September 11th, 2001, the movie came out, the cartoon Monsters, Inc., which is about a group of monsters who rule over humanity by needlessly scaring them because they need to harness the negative energy from them. The motto in that film is "We scare because we care," which sums to 185, just like World Trade Center. Early in that film, when the lineup of monsters are coming out onto the work floor, you see the big clock behind them, and the hands are right on 9 and 11. That movie is littered with references to 9/11. Anyhow, the plaque up in the lodge, which was put there May 18th, 1968, that was a date with 110 numerology. The World Trade Centers were 110 stories tall. The name Osama bin Laden in gematria sums to 110. So does the name Rockefeller, and it was David Rockefeller who proposed the World Trade Center project, and it was Nelson Rockefeller, his cousin, who was the governor, the 49th governor of New York at the time, who approved the project. Twin Towers in gematria sums to 49, so it's interesting that the 49th governor approved the project. For those who aren't familiar with my work, Revelation is the book of prophecy from the end of the Bible. New York's establishment date syncs up with the numbers of Revelation. Revelation also has gematria 49. The Freemasons who rule over this world, who really are the one world order, They work from the Book of Prophecy. And this lodge up in Washington State, Washington also equals 49 like Revelation, named after the first president. Washington equals 49, Twin Towers 49, the firm that built the World Trade Centers from Seattle. The date of the plaque, May 18th, 1968, it had 110 numerology. We talked about how the stories are 110, the buildings were 110 stories tall. It was also a date with a life lesson number of 47, and 47 is the number of foundation for the Freemasons. Euclid's 47th problem, again, about how to establish foundation. The word foundation equals 47. The word framework equals 47. The word authority equals 47. The name Osama bin Laden with the reduced method also sums to 47. Seattle is on the 47th parallel, where the construction firm was from that built the World Trade Centers. Seattle, its landmark, the Space Needle, has a rotating restaurant that does a full rotation every 47 minutes. The word time also equals 47, very important number. The firm that built the World Trade Centers from Seattle, and likely having Freemason connections to somebody up in that lodge in Burlington, the firm that built the World Trade Centers, their name in Gematria sums to 156. And the number 911, 911, is the 156th prime number. If you write out 33 as a word, it sums to 156. Those towers existed from August of 68 to September 2001, 33 years and a month. Again, false flag also sums to 33. The point is, the Freemasons, they are a network. They are working together in secret, plotting against us. The World Trade Center, the firm that built those towers, they knew that those buildings were built to be demolished. Maybe not everybody in the construction company, but the people who are at the top of the company who accepted the contract. The point is, these people are doing everything by the same numbers all throughout history. The towers fell down 33 years after their construction. The mall attack in Burlington came exactly 33 days after the establishment date anniversary of the lodge in Burlington, which is August 21st. From August 21st to September 23rd, 33 days. And quick point about the shooting that just happened in Burlington. It happened in a Macy's store. I said the night of the shooting, I said, watch, they're going to arrest the shooter tomorrow by the numbers, because the day that they arrested him was exactly 61 days before the upcoming Thanksgiving holiday, where the Macy's Day Parade happens. Macy's in Gematria sums to 61, and the shooter was arrested 61 days before the parade. Plus, they even ended up saying he was Turkish. Think about Thanksgiving, Turkey Day. Here's what else you need to know about Thanksgiving in this shooting. Washington is the 42nd state named after George Washington, who was born on the Old World calendar, which was still in play when the nation began. On that calendar, George Washington was born on the 42nd day of the year. The word Freemason equals 42. The small way, the word Freemason equals 96, the big way. Macy, the singular, also sums to 42. If you take the numbers that divide into 42 and add them together, they sum to 96. The word Freemason's 42, the small way, 96, the big way. The word Thanksgiving is 96. And if you look up the story of the original pilgrims that supposedly came over here, they left Plymouth on September 6th, 9/6. Supposedly the story as we're told. The entire story of Thanksgiving is by the numbers because our entire nation's history is by the numbers when you learn this language of numerology and gematria. Also, the day of the shooting in Washington at Burlington, it was September 23rd, 2016, which is New Year's Day on the French Republican calendar, the calendar that came out of the French Revolution. R.H. Macy, who the Macy's stores are named after, he died in history March 29th. He died on the date in the year 1877, and he died in Paris, France. He died in Paris, France. Now we get the Macy's shooting on the French Republican New Year, 139 years after his death. Freemasonry sums to 58, the small way, 139, the big way. The shooting also came exactly 139 days before the governor of Washington's birthday, Jay Inslee, and that's not a coincidence. As I show in all of my research, all of these shootings, these bombings, they're always synced up with the mayors and the governors of the states. And this just goes to show how well scripted out this Freemason network is. They have people in place that need to be there with the right birthdays. You know, it is amazing when you look at what they've done. And you have to realize the reason this has been accomplished is because they have been working by this code for at the very least, the last 500 years, likely for thousands of years. So these are old Freemason practices. It's the reason they have everything lined up the way we do. It's the reason we're on the nonsensical calendar system that we're on, the Gregorian calendar, which makes no sense. You learn about gematria, you start to figure out why there's 28 days in February. The word Gregorian sums to the same thing as calendar, the same thing as Freemasonry. And again, it is the Freemasons who built this world around us. So I just shared a lot of information there. Hand it back over to the host.
That's some pretty powerful stuff, Zach. And I was listening to you speak with Jeff at Jeff Young's Music Without Boundaries from that show last night, and you were touching on a bunch of other numbers as well. I heard you talk about the number 93. I know that Aleister Crowley oftentimes would say that because it is the sum of do what thou wilt, and there's a whole bunch of different, we could do a multitude of podcasts just on what that means, but I think that I even went further into that specific number and found out people were using the term do what thou will as long as you don't hurt anybody. I did some research, and before Crowley was ever even born, many, many years before that, pagans would say do what thou will as long as you hurt no one, or as long as you hurt none. And that number came to the same, or that came to the same number as well, 93. So it just, once again, it seems like you can have something that has a good purpose at one point in time, but then somebody gets all this power and recognition, and because the way the system works, he takes that saying and just skews it a little bit, takes out the as long as you hurt none, right? And leaves in just do what thou wilt. And then it seems like, once again, they can take something that has good intentions and turn it into bad. But 93 was the plane that was also supposedly went into the towers. And there's a lot of symbology and numerology behind that number also.
Absolutely. Let's talk about 93 for a second for your listeners. So the lodge in Burlington is lodge number 93. 93 is the number of Thelema, the occult religion where they greet each other with 93 and they say goodbye by saying 93. 93 is the number for Saturn, and Saturn is the keeper of time. And in this world, they tell us the sun is 93 million miles away. The sun is truly the keeper of time for us. The sun dictates time. Science tells us the sun is 93 million miles away. The word Saturn equals 93. And this month, September 29th, for the first time, there's a new scientific holiday. It's called Galactic Tick Day. And the purpose of the scientific holiday, brand new this year, is to celebrate the sun's journey around the Milky Way galaxy. And if you read the article, they'll give you all this hogwash about why they picked the date September 29th. The truth is they picked that date because it's the day that leaves 93 days left in the year. The number connected to Saturn, the number that is supposed to be the distance from Earth to the sun, 93 million miles. And this year, September 29th, 2016, is also a date with 54 numerology. The word sun, S-U-N, in Gematria sums to 54. All throughout history, this pairing of 54 and 93. In this recent Burlington shooting, they said that the shooter was captured in Oak Harbor, Washington, which means that somehow he escaped the shooting and got on a ferry boat, which is completely impossible. Anyhow, where he was arrested, Oak Harbor, Washington, sums to 93, and it's no coincidence. This lodge is behind this false flag, thus the tribute to 93, where they captured the shooter by the numbers. And all throughout history, 93 has been important in propaganda. You know, we just had the Marine Marathon bombing the other weekend on September 17th in New Jersey. Of course, a Marine Marathon not long after the Boston Marathon bombing. They said that the bomb went off in New Jersey at the Marathon for the Marines at 9:30 in the morning. By the way, the word Marine equals 33, so does boardwalk, so does false flag, and the bomb went off in a trash can on the boardwalk, supposedly. Well, they showed that the boardwalk was burned down again. That boardwalk's had a history of trouble. Anyhow, the Boston Marathon bombing in Gematria sums to 93, just like propaganda. And they said that the bombers were the Tsarnaev brothers, the younger brother, the one who survived. They said the other one was killed in a shootout. The younger brother, his birthday was July 22nd, 1993. Of course, in the year 93. And if you had 7 plus 2 plus 2 plus 1 plus 9 plus 9 plus 3 for his birthday, July 22nd, 1993, it sums to 33, the number of the false flag. Massachusetts is one of only 3 states in the United States with a gematria of 33. The states that sum to 33 are the first and last, Delaware and Hawaii, and the 6th, Massachusetts. And the reason they chose number 6 is because the numerology of 33 is 3 plus 3 equals 6. So anyhow, Boston Marathon bombing, total hoax, propaganda by the numbers that nobody should have been fooled by. From the anniversary date of the Boston Marathon bombing to the date of the bombing in New Jersey is also 156 days. And we just talked about how that number has to do with false flag. False flag equals 156. 33, when written out as a word, sums to 156. False flag also equals 33. Also, April 15th, the date of the Boston Marathon bombing, that's the 105th day of the year. And September 17th is the day that leaves 105 days left in the year. And what 105 is it's the number for Zionism and Masonry. April 15th is typically tax day for us, too, the day we get bent over by the Federal Reserve. Here we are in a nation where we're not supposed to pay taxes on our income, but what do we all do as a nation? We all pay taxes on our income, and we don't do a thing about it. And, you know, that's just one of many examples of the kind of true tyranny we put up with. That is supposed to be one of our rights, to not have to pay taxes on our income, but we all just bend over and do it. and don't fight back. And that's what needs to change in our society. People need to wake up to what we are living under, what we're truly paying our taxes to, what's being done to us. I mean, people need to think about how much they're working a year. Most people are giving away a third of their work to this tyrant government. You know, no time for family and friends because they're having to work every day. And where's most of their money going to? These banker criminals that rule over us with lies and tyranny. And our taxes are going straight to their pockets, straight to fund these false flags and hoaxes that deceive us and put us in unnecessary fear. So, you know, for anyone listening to me and going, well, what's the point? My point is look, I'm showing you how your news is scripted. People need to spread this knowledge so we can put an end to this madness.
Boom. Well said. And I did not mean to interrupt you, Jeff, a minute ago. Please let us know what you were going to bring up.
You got to think about this kind of the statement you threw out there when you were relating it back to the pagan and do what thou will as long as you don't hurt. That's just a rationalization, because the statement in and of itself, do what thou will, even without the other part that seems to lighten it up a little bit and makes it seem more palatable, is still a narcissistic statement. That's not what we're here for. We're here to be of service to other people, right? And, you know, that's what the intent, at least last time I checked, of why we're here, and to transcend the ego. And that statement, I mean, paganism isn't a good thing as far as I've researched. And there's a lot of people, you know, trying to rationalize their way out of things that they want to, you know, make a little more palatable. So that was the only thing I wanted to bring up.
No, I appreciate that. And I can certainly, you know, what you're saying is very honorable to want to, you know, evolve and help others. I think that that's a part of the spiritual journey and evolution. If it's just all about you, well, you know, that you're going to digress eventually. If it's all about you, you might think you're on top of the world for a while, but you have to have those personal relationships. And certainly it's a law of cause and effect. You get what you put out there. So, but at the same time, you have to care about yourself. You can't be too selfless. It's a balance thing. And I appreciate you bringing that up to us, because that is really important. If some people look at do what thou will is, you know, do what your will is, what your purpose is. But if it's referred to as do what thou wilt, that, in my opinion, is more of like what you just said, do whatever you want. So it's just those little manipulations of words and even letters there that they can just change the whole thing. And I'm telling you, Zach, what you're talking about is reminded me of the film that came out with Ryan Reynolds called Chaos Theory, where this guy is just by the book. Everything that he does is at a certain time. He allots a specific amount of time to go do Y, go do X, etc. And somebody plays a joke on him by changing the clock a little bit. I don't know. Have you seen this film?
I haven't, but now I want to check it out.
Oh, you'll love it. So somebody goes and changes the clock just by a couple of minutes, and it literally just turns his life upside down. I mean, it almost causes a divorce and all these other crazy things happen in his life. So what I'm wondering is, the way you're breaking everything down like this, if people can learn these patterns, you know, you could start a change by just changing the patterns and not even having to do anything in a harmful or violent manner. I mean, if you literally just change that clock a couple of minutes, boom, let the universe take care of the rest and enjoy the ride.
And that might be what we need to do. Yeah, another great movie on this topic is, it's called Knowing. Knowing. It stars Nicolas Cage. It came out, I forget, a few years ago.
Classic.
Yeah, that movie begins, early in the movie, he's looking through a telescope with his son, and they're looking at Saturn. They're talking about Saturn through the telescope. And the word knowing has that gematria of 93, just like Saturn. And for anyone who hasn't seen the film, what it's about is 50 years before the present time, a young student puts in a time capsule a piece of paper with all these numbers written down in a sequence. And Nicolas Cage plays the part of an MIT professor who's the father of the son who gets this piece of paper out of the time capsule 50 years after it's been placed there. And he starts looking at this piece of paper, trying to figure out what this child wrote down with all these numbers. And the first thing he notices is, in this document, is these numbers sequence that lines up perfectly with September 11th. It has the date of the attack, the number of the people killed, and the coordinates of the attack, the parallel and the meridian. And from there, what he realizes is this document was 50 years of predictions for what, or actually it was more than 50 years, it's like 100 years of predictions for tragedies that are going to happen in the world on the date they're going to happen, the number of people that are going to die, and where it's going to happen. And again, knowing equals 93, Saturn equals 93, 93 is the keeper of time, the powers that be, the Freemasons, they operate by this code. You know, September 11th, on that day, the first plane to hit the big buildings that look like massive 11s. 11's the master number in numerology. New York's the 11th state. The first plane to hit the towers was flight AA11. Of course, A is the first letter. AA is 11, so 1111. hits the big buildings that look like big 11s in the 11th state. On the day that leaves 111 days left in the year, New York in Gematria equals 111. The next plane to hit the other tower supposedly hit at 9:03 a.m. The first plane to hit, flight AA11, hit floors 93 through 99 in the official report. So 93 through 99, 9:03 a.m. And then, of course, that day there was also flight 93 of 33 passengers that crashed in Pennsylvania. The fourth plane that day was Flight 77 that hit the 77-foot-tall Pentagon on the 77th meridian, which runs through Washington, D.C., exactly 77 minutes after taking off. If you look at the 9/11 Commission report, it says the plane, Flight 77, took off at 8:20 and crashed at 9:37, which is 77 minutes later. And again, it's the numerical code that these people are operating by. September 11th is words. Sums 277, one of the chief architects of September 11th was Paul Wolfowitz. Paul Wolfowitz began working for the Pentagon in 77. He's the one who wrote the document called the Project for a New American Century, a new Pearl Harbor. He said that the United States of America needed a new Pearl Harbor for a new foreign and domestic agenda for the new century. September 11th, 2001 was New Year's Day of the Coptic calendar, the old world Christian calendar, the day that some people say is the real birthday of Jesus, September 11th. So, you know, you start to realize what these people do throughout history. They work off multiple calendars. They love the New Year's Day, just like how we got the Burlington shooting on New Year's Day of the French Republican calendar as a tribute to the death of R.H. Macy, who died in Paris, France. Again, like you said, if people can learn to recognize just some of these numbers, they'll see the pattern all throughout history. The night of the Burlington shooting, I got off the radio doing another interview with the station in Denver, and I taught that audience entirely about the number 74. And I said, if you learn to recognize the number 74, it's probably the one that you'll see coded the most in these events. And as soon as I got off the radio interview, there was the shooting at Cascade Mall in Burlington. Cascade Mall equals 74. With regards to New York and September 11th, New York's on the 74th meridian. The word Masonic equals 74, occult 74, Jewish 74, holiday 74, Independence Day 74. Very important number to this nation's history, and it is the reason that our birthday is 7/4, July 4th.
You know, also, I'm thinking about this system, and if you take it to the top level of the calendar itself that was, I guess you could say, ushered into this specific era, control the calendar, control the people.
Control the language, right. It's all about control.
You can integrate everything and package it together, and then specific people that are initiated can know what to look for. But, you know, also at the same time, I know many awesome people that have different lifestyles, a part of, you know, different societies like the Rosicrucians and people that are Freemasons and people that are part of specific orders. I think it really boils down to the person themselves. And sometimes I hear people and they'll make a comment like, well, those guys are just lower level. And maybe as far as the initiation process, as far as into that program they are, but they're definitely, I wouldn't say they're at a lower level just because they don't have that kind of knowledge. I mean, I think we give some people too much credit oftentimes. And if you read the Nag Hammadi treaties, they talk about these archons, how they kind of control the world essentially behind the scenes where we can't see it. And I don't necessarily say I agree with that 100%, but symbolically I can see it where we give so much power and control over to people sometimes and just like are so submissive even though they continue to do the things that they do. People continue to accept it. And, you know, like if you look at the vaccines and what's put in the vaccines, it's talk about weapons of mass destruction thrown in plain sight. You know, that's a whole other episode also. But I think that maybe if we could reach out to the people that are a part of these societies and say, look, there's a few people that have different clearances levels above you because they've been a part of these networks or they were born into it. You know, if enough people wake up to this, they're going to say, look, we're not going to accept this. We're not going to give you all our power. And they'll do it themselves. They'll break off. And do you think that maybe that would be a good way to break this system of control, is to reach out to people that are a part of those communities?
Absolutely. I did that in the video I put out dedicated to the lodge up in Burlington because I said it. I mean, if you're part of this Freemason network, what you don't realize is you're being used as a front to legitimize something that's not legitimate. Most people think Freemasonry is just a community, secret society that most men can become a part of and, you know, participate in whatever they do behind their windowless buildings. And for the most part, I think most people who are involved in the Freemasonry, they're not really up to anything too nefarious, but there's people within each lodge that are in the positions of knowing. For example, Burlington Lodge number 93, there might be only one man connected to that lodge that knows the relationship between what was going on with that lodge and the shooting in Burlington. But it's the other men in the lodge who don't know that legitimize the whole Freemasonry thing. So yeah, I think we absolutely have to reach out to other levels and just spread awareness, even people who are a part of what is the problem.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Absolutely. And you brought up earlier also, Jeff, childhood's end. And did you see that TV series on Sci-Fi Channel?
Indeed.
Wasn't that spooky? That talk about the Luciferian agenda where they push it right in your face. I mean, just that whole thing. What was your thoughts about that film? Or not that film, about that series?
Well, that was the film Kubrick wanted to make. You know, he couldn't make it because the technology wasn't available. I thought they did an amazing job with it. And to be honest, I bawled for about a half hour after watching the entire thing at the end.
It was very depressing.
Yeah, well, sitting with all the truth, and there's so much predictive programming and all of this stuff that we're even talking about is so far from what I want to be thinking about, and the frequency that, you know, as a musician, what I'm all about. So to have to navigate through this whole thing, and it's a mind trip.
You know, and Jeff, you've got a great radio program, Jeff Young's Music Without Boundaries. I know you do this at least once a week that I'm aware of. How often does this program go down?
We've been bouncing around, but it's once a week. As you know, you brought up Douglas earlier. He has his show on Tuesdays and Saturdays. I believe I'm going to be on his show this evening, as a matter of fact. So plug for that. And Zachary has a new show, The Gematria Effect, which we can talk about on Wednesdays. So I think I found a cool home on Monday evenings.
Right on. You know, and also, Zach, you have just an awesome YouTube channel. You've got over 30,000 subscribers. You're growing fast. A lot of people know about you. You've reached out to well over 6 million viewers in a pretty short amount of time. And there's a lot of stuff going on right now with politics, and some people speculate that both people up there are, you know, they're basically actors. And I'm one of those people that speculate both people that are running for office are just like two actors and actresses running for this play. And have you been able to decipher who's going to win based on your gematria equations that you've put together?
I'm pretty sure it's been all in the bag for Hillary since the beginning. And I think last night was a shining example. The first debate was at Hofstra, and Hofstra has the exact same gematria as Clinton. Perfect match. Small way in, the big way. Hofstra, the small way is 33, just like Clinton. The big way, 87, just like Clinton. The coordinates of Hofstra is the 40th parallel and the 73rd meridian. Hillary alone equals 40. So does email, which is why we've been getting all this propaganda about Hillary's email, which is a total... It really is just a total non-issue. The whole Benghazi thing that happened on September 11th is all stage propaganda. You know, Hillary, Donald Trump, they are all puppet stooges for the gang that rule over us. And these elections, they're all about divide and conquer, getting people to, you know, put their energy and faith in political parties that don't represent them at all. It's just a big show. It's a big distraction. But I'm pretty sure Hillary will be our next president. And I think part of the riddle is, in Israel in the past, there were 44 kings. The next president will be the 45th. And I'm pretty sure it will be our first female president after, you could say, the first 44 kings. So, you know, I'm pretty sure we'll see Hillary rolling around. Her birthday to Inauguration Day is 87 days, just like the name Clinton, too, the way it falls this year. I expect Hillary to be the next president. And real quick, if you don't mind, I want to say something about Childhood's End, the show you brought up.
Please.
Yeah, Childhood's End in Gematria sums to 66. Revelation is the 66th book of the Bible, the book of prophecy, the book about the destruction of the earth. Interestingly enough, the word prophecy and the word destroy both sum to 106 in Gematria. The Burlington Freemason Lodge was at the address 106 Warner Street. Anyhow, Childhood's End equals 66. And right in the beginning of that film, when you're in the, I forget what it is, the Wainwright Global Media, the big news media company that they made up for that show, they show on the paper, they show that their owner had just died in 2005. It says Hugo Wainwright, 1939 to 2005. They put it right on the screen in front of you, dead at 66. Drops dead at 66, it says. And again, Childhood's End equals 66. This man, Hugo Wainwright, dead at age 66, born in 1939. Revelation is based on the 39 books of the Old Testament. Also in that TV series that they made, the Globe is the news source that's used throughout it. The Globe equals 74, the number that they love so much. And they call the people who are running the show the Overlords. Overlords equals 47. Again, that number of Freemason Foundation. The show is littered with numbers. The last surviving man, the young black man, his name is Milo Rodrigues, a name in Gematria that also sums to 74. They code all of our stuff that is presented to us through the TV with the same numbers again and again. And again, if you apply this gematria knowledge, you're going to see how just repetitive they are with these numbers and all that's presented to us.
And if you even go back and check out the original cover of the book, you know, what with all the popularity of the one eye symbology and everyone doing that signing lately, you can go back and look at the original cover of the book and you'll see it.
Right.
It's just there.
Right. Also, I forgot to mention Karelin, the angel, the devil, whatever you want to call him in that show that comes down, the name Karelin equals 33, that other number of Freemason obsession. If you write out 33 as a word, it also sums to 66, like childhood's end. Very special numbers to the gang.
Well, you know, in Childhood's End, it potentially shows these overlords getting rid of all disease and making everything kumbaya on the planet. And then all of a sudden after that, many years later, they just decide to take all the children and blow it up. I mean, oh yeah, everything's great. Oh, by the way, we're going to take your kids and blow the shit out of your planet. You don't have any soul, so what do you think about that? I mean, it's just, it's retarded. I can see it from a mile away. And I know that we're getting close to an hour here, so maybe I could just ask a few more questions because I know you have limited time, but you're definitely blowing my mind, and I appreciate that. Can I ask you guys just a few more quick questions?
Absolutely. I'm not in a rush.
Awesome. And Josh, you okay? I mean, Jeff?
Indeed. Last night, Zach called me Jeff, Josh, anything with a J, Jess.
Sweet. I was like, oops.
That's an opportunity for me to give my reverbnation.com/Jeff, not Jess Young.
Bingo. Much appreciated, Jeff. And I just want to say, too, that where I was going with this is there's a couple other numbers that have really, I've seen in a lot of Hollywood films and TV shows. 23. Even Jim Carrey came out in a movie, 23, where he went completely crazy finding that number. I don't know if you guys have seen that film.
I've seen it. Yeah, that movie is a mocking of the truth. You know, there's this scene where they're explaining how the word pink equals 23, and they give this really complex description of how pink equals 23. Well, pink really does equal 23 in gematria, but it's very simple. P is the 16th letter. 1 plus 6 becomes 7. I is the 9th letter, so I is 9. N's the 14th letter. 1 plus 4 becomes 5. K is the 11th letter. 1 plus 1 becomes 2. If you add up pink, 7 plus 9 plus 5 plus 2 sums to 23. And that film is one of these films that's introducing the truth to people, but doing it in sort of a mocking, ridiculous fashion. Last year about this time, we heard about the death of Jim Carrey's girlfriend. Do you remember this story? Jim Carrey's girlfriend died about a year
Absolutely.
ago. And I don't have the research fresh in front of me right now, but all throughout that movie, I wish I had it in front. There's so many things in that movie. I forget, I haven't watched the movie in a while. I think like the thing is he finds out he murders his girlfriend or something. Anyway, her name is coded in numbers all over that film. So I almost feel that story last year about his girlfriend was a tribute to the film. And if they really murdered this woman, if she really died, it might have been a sick ritual sacrifice, truly in tribute to the film, the number 23. And the thing about the number 23 is it has a connection to Satan through gematria and also to the word death. If you write out 23 as a word, it sums to 163, which is the 38th prime number. And the word death equals 38. All throughout history, so many celebrities have died by the number 38. This is something I've been talking about on Jeff's show for more than a year. And then earlier this year, his friend died by this number, former drummer from Megadeth. So 23, it has a connection to death in numbers, and it also has a connection to Satan. And, you know, the people who rule over us, I'm not in the occult, I'm not part of the satanic religion, but from what I understand about Satanism is it has to do with self-worship, which has that parallel with the Lema, do what thou wilt, essentially do what you're feeling, do what you want. The people who rule over us, it's clear that they operate by this kind of code, that it's all about them and other people are secondary, and it really does seem that this world is full of ritual sacrifice and connections to people who are in high places, from government officials to actors to athletes to musicians. So that's what I can tell you about the number 23 right now. I wish I had I remember the girlfriend's name now. It was Catriona White. I wish I had all my notes in front of me, but yeah, her whole death was very bizarre and very much connected to the movie The Number 23.
Do you think that there was something sinister connected to the death of Nick? Jeff, how well did you know Nick?
Well, let's lay it out this way. I'm just going to neutrally and objectively and factually describe the circumstances, and then Zach can springboard off that and throw the gematria at you all, and you can sit back and take it for what it is. How's that?
Perfect.
So for folks who don't know Nick Menza, He's the son of horn player Don Menza, infamous for his brilliant arrangements, and he was the sidekick for Buddy Rich, the great drummer, who influenced every drummer that came after him, one of the greatest drummers to ever live. So Nick grew up, backstage and even setting up Buddy Rich's drums. He's been on my show. He told the story how he smoked a joint backstage at the Hollywood Bowl with Buddy Rich. And his father actually played the infamous Pink Panther horn that everyone knows. You go listen to that. That's Nick's father. So quite an interesting young man. He was my roommate at the time when I was in Megadeth on the So Far, So Good, So What tour. He worked his way into the band as drum tech. And because I couldn't really get along with the three cats in the band because of their on-the-road habits, I ended up rooming with that drum tech. So Nick became my roommate and dear friend. We've stayed friends all these years. He was in our Truth group, Truth Sells But Who's Buying on Facebook. I still see his thumbnail there every time I look through our esteemed group of truthers. So he's been on my radio show. Folks can go back and listen. He had a great sense of humor. He was more than the drummer from Megadeth. He was an amazing artist. He had 2 sons. And he went through a lot of stuff, as most folks do, since he left Megadeth, and he was just on his way back. He had his biography was about to come out. He had art exhibition coming, a tour in Europe with his new band, which is Ohm. Let me give you just a little background on Ohm. This is a jazz fusion trio headed by Chris Poland, who is the original guitar player from Megadeth. I replaced Chris Poland in Megadeth. Okay, Chris played on the first 2 Megadeth albums. I was on the third. Nick came in on the album after me, Rest in Peace, and forward he was in about for 6 albums. So it's just an odd coincidence that Nick, all these years later, began playing with the original guitar player from Megadeth. Now you have bookend members. You have a drummer that was in one era of Megadeth and the lead guitar player that was one of the original pioneers of that sound. Now
really
check this out. Check this out. Nick was replacing the original drummer. It gets a little complicated, but it comes together real quick. Nick replaced the original drummer, David Eagle, from Ohm. So this was a new project for Nick, and it was kind of a sad project because David Eagle had passed away a year earlier. Put a pin in that for a minute. Okay, just a few months ago, the band was playing some warm-up shows for their tour that they were about to depart for Europe. There's a club in Studio City, right across from Universal, right down the street from 666 Disney, right up the street from Capitol Records, which was our label. It's a world-famous jazz club called the Baked Potato, where you literally go there and they have a menu of designer baked potatoes and you watch jazz. It's kind of like the Comedy Store, the Improv, where these musicians go to test their acts out, and everyone from Alan Holsworth to Steve Lukather to Scott Henderson to Ohm, and Ohm pretty much became one of the house bands because they were so popular and experimental. For those looking for a benchmark, they were kind of like Mahavishnu, John McLaughlin meets Jeff Beck meets Alan Holsworth. That's kind of the vibe. So here Nick is in this band replacing a drummer, okay, who passed away a year, and that's hard to do, We've heard stories of other bands. Now, what happened was they were playing this show at the Baked Potato, and a few songs into the set, something happened to Nick, and he collapsed on his drum kit, and he was rushed to the hospital and pronounced DOA. And yeah, that's sad and it's tragic, and it hit all of us real hard. And I haven't been able to go back and listen to that full episode of Music Without Boundaries since. But the part that's going to really blow everyone's mind is when I tell you that just about a year prior, the original drummer from Ohm, David Eagle, also had a heart attack on stage at the same exact venue, the Baked Potato in Studio City, California. He didn't die DOA, but he did die 3 months later. So that hit me pretty hard. I took to Google and I Googled how many musicians have died on stage in history, and nothing like this has happened before or since, or has happened before, and I doubt anything will happen akin to this anytime in the future. So, that puts a perspective on it. And then, from there, we can talk about Prince and when Vanity passed. And I'm a huge Prince fan, and I just asked Zach as a personal and private favor that I thought was just going to be an email between he and I to do the Gematria on Vanity. And he ended up posting the Prince a warning to Prince in the video he did about Vanity on his YouTube channel, and he told Prince he better watch his ass. And that was back in February, and we talked about it on my show during that month. And all these months later, here we sit. So there's just two stories. Like, Prince was really well known. This story about Nick is going to go under the radar because the puzzle pieces about David Eagle and Ohm isn't a well-known band, and how the whole story that I just laid out happened, it's just going to skate right by most people, as most truth does. And this is just a perfect illustration of, how that happens, because the pieces are so far removed, and without understanding all the dynamics of the puzzle, there's really no way to put it together. But we just did right now, and I'm sure Zach can add the Gematria to the scenario that happened with Nick for some further color commentary.
And if I could just throw in real quick, I remember the day that I found out about Prince, immediately my gut feeling was it was not a natural death and something happened. And the more research I did into it that day, I said, yeah, man, this is really looking like there's possible foul play. I did a podcast on it the next day on Leak Project, and then I started doing some other research, and it was just insane. So, yeah, what do you have on that, Zach?
For Prince or Nick Menza?
Both, please.
Well, again, the 38's this number for death. The baked potato in Gematria sums to 38. Like Jeff explained, the drummers for both bands, almost a year apart to the day, collapsed on stage. Nick Menza died. The other man survived for a little while, then passed. And the word drummer also sums to 38. I forget what band it was earlier this year. There were a lot of former musicians, retired musicians who passed early in the year, still practicing musicians. I think it was the Mamas and the Papas as well, where two members of that band died on the same day, and one of them was the drummer. But anyhow, drummer in Gematria has this fateful number, 38, the number connected to death, connected to celebrity deaths all throughout history. And Nick Menza and the former drummer for this band Ohm seem to have been rituals by the numbers, unfortunately. As for Prince, his death didn't surprise me at all because, like Jeff said, in February, I said, Prince better watch out. Vanity, Prince's former girlfriend from the Purple Rain days, died on February 15th of this year, just before the 58th Grammys, 58, that Freemasonry number. We were just talking about Childhood's End. That was written by Arthur C. Clarke. Mm-hmm. Arthur C. Clarke equals 58, the way he spells his name. Anyhow, Vanity died before the 58th Grammys on February 15th, which is the 46th day of the year. Vanity in Gematria sums to 46, so does Sacrifice. And February 15th is the third day of Lupercalia, which begins February 13th, the 44th day of the year. The word kill equals 44, so does Lupercalia. You might recall that Antonin Scalia, Lupercalia, those words have very similar endings in spelling. Antonin Scalia died on February 13th on a ranch. Ranch equals 44, just like how February 13th is the 44th day of the year, just like how Lupercalia equals 44, just like how the word kill equals 44. So Vanity died just before the 58th Grammys on the 46th day of the year, connecting to Sacrifice. When I decoded Vanity's birth name, her birth name summed to 57, like her age of death. And what I noticed is there were major parallels in her name Gematria to Prince's, and Prince had numbers connecting to death just like Vanity. And I said, wow, these people are almost like a perfect match in numbers. And what I said specifically in that video is I said Prince also has this number 67 connected to him. I said blood sacrifice equals 67. With all these numbers coded on Prince, he better watch his ass. And lo and behold, he died 67 days after Vanity. You know, the exact numbers I had talked about in the video. And the only reason I know to look for these patterns is because so many people have died by these same numbers. Also, the name Prince alone equals 38. Chanhassen equals 38. That's where his home was in Minnesota. Minnesota happens to equal 38. In the days after his death, they said a doctor had visited him from Oregon. Oregon happens to sum to 38. Whole lot of 38 coded into the reporting of Prince's death. What else is interesting is in history, he had the song, I Would Die For You. And the way he spelled that title was, instead of writing the word 4, he just put the number 4, so 4. And instead of writing the word you, he just put the letter U. You know, what I think about is when they made that title, I don't think that was as popular in the English language. That kind of language has become more popular in the texting age and the instant messaging age. This came out in the 80s before all that. I would die for you that way. For you is the 21st letter, so 421, I would die 421. He died on April 21st, 421.
He told you right in that song. Isn't that crazy?
You go back and you look at when that song was released. It was released on a date with 38 numerology, the death number. You know, what I was talking about when he died is I began doing research, looking at his recent interviews, and the one that stood out to me right away was the one he'd done with Tavis Smiley about 5 years earlier. And Tavis Smiley asked him why he didn't support Barack Obama. And he said, the reason I don't support Obama is because I don't involve myself with politics or things of this world. All we can go by is prophecy. And when I heard him say that, I said, you got to be kidding me. Because what I figured out from doing this research, and I had just started writing my book, or rewriting my book at the time. I was a week into it when he died. And the whole book is showing how the Freemasons have been working by the prophecy code all this time. So when I heard that interview and him talking about how all we can go by is prophecy, I noticed how the day of his death, ESPN all day was talking about how he went to the Warriors basketball game against the Thunder. And so I looked at the box score of that game, the date of that game, and the day he died. And what's so interesting is he went to that game on March 3rd, 3-3. It was in Golden State. Golden State, the Warriors, they're originally from Philadelphia, the city named from Revelation, the book of prophecy. For a little rig sports history, the first time the Warriors went to a championship after they moved from Philadelphia to California, the first team they played was the new team from Philadelphia, the 76ers. Anyway, from the day Prince went to that game, March 3rd, to the day he died, April 21st, was 49 days. And again, Revelation equals 49, which is the book of prophecy. Warriors equals 49. The Warriors are originally from Philadelphia. They won the first basketball championship in the year 1947. And the score of that game that he went to, the Warriors won 121 to 106. Revelation, the small way, is 49, like Warriors. Revelation, the big way, is 121. Warriors, the big way, is also 121. They played the Oklahoma City Thunder twice in that same week. Both games they won with 121 points, which I predicted in advance. You can go back and watch the videos I put out. But anyway, 121 is the number of Revelation. The Thunder lost with 106, which is the number of prophecy. And when you add 121 and 106 together, you get the number 227, which is the 49th prime number, bringing us back to Revelation. Prince died 49 days after that game, saying all we could go by in this world is prophecy. All of this stuff is scripted. Sports are scripted to the point. Anyone who doesn't think sports are scripted that's listening to this, watch my work and see what I'm exposing. Sports are scripted more than just to the point. They're scripted to the stat line. The box scores are scripted. It is amazing how well planned out these games are and executed by the numbers. You are watching a theater performance when you watch professional sports. That's why these people are paid like actors.
I got to jump in real quick because if you can figure out the code to these sporting games, you could get a lot of money. You could gamble. You could go to Vegas.
Some people already are. Some of them already are.
You can make a lot of money, and it's just like I told people when the Cavs were down 3-1 and no team has ever come back in the NBA Finals. I said, bet on the Cavs. They're coming back. This is a guarantee. They're going to win this series in Game 7 on the real King James's birthday. It's all by the numbers, and they came back and won. They were the 33rd team to ever try to come back from 3-1. Cleveland's the only city in the league that comes to 33. So the only team with 33 gematria comes back from down 3-1 for the first time in 33 tries. LeBron James, King James, ended up winning it on the real King James's birthday, plus a whole lot more. And a lot of people I won money for because the odds were 20-1 at that point. You bet $10, you made $200. And the other thing I made a lot of money for people was the Super Bowl, because I told people months in advance what the Super Bowl would be. I said the Broncos would win, and I even said who the MVP of that game would be, which turned out to be true. I said it would be Von Miller, number 58. Cam Newton was the 58th quarterback to start in a Super Bowl this last year. And the reason I knew what the Super Bowl would be and who would be the MVP and what the narrative would be is because, again, sports are scripted, and if you know what to look for, you'll recognize what they're doing in the plotting. In the mainstream media right now, they're trying to contrive a race war. The weekend before the Super Bowl, they debuted the new O.J. Simpson show on FX that began with the white Bronco chase. And even before all this happened, I was telling people the symbolism will be the white Bronco versus the Black Panther. Very clear white and black symbolism. Also, the Super Bowl is going to be in San Francisco, not far from Oakland, where the Black Panther Party was established. Oakland equals 58. Huey P. Newton equals 58, who established the Black Panther Party. There was an article in ESPN how the next QB to start in a Super Bowl would be the 58th. And I knew it would be Cam Newton. Newton, who shares the same last name as Huey P. Newton, who started the Black Panther Party. Cam Newton literally became the 58th quarterback to start in a Super Bowl this last year. And who won the MVP? Number 58, who was drafted one pick behind him in the same draft. Everything that's going on right now in this nation in the media, from sports to news programming, is divide and conquer, race, religion, sexuality, political party, you name it.
It's like we're in this program almost, the way you put everything together. Literally, if you look at some different models of physics, the holographic universe theory, I start to wonder, even if it isn't that level, because the way that DNA breaks down and the way our minds work, etc., these specific patterns, it seems to me if you can put people on these certain patterns and keep certain ones in play, it's just going to be a lot easier to control individuals. And what you're talking about reminds me of a conversation I had with brain expert Neil Slade a couple days ago on the Leak Project, where he talks about how the brain is essentially three different parts. You've got the reptilian brain, you've got the mammalian, and then the super mammalian. And the media is so good at getting us to go into the reptilian mind, which is fight or flight. That's all some people think about. What do I do? Where do I go? And they don't think creative, and they're always in this fear-based mindset. And you brought up a good point, Jeff, about the vibrational levels and the frequencies. You don't like to talk about this kind of stuff because of the frequency that it is. This is a very dark frequency, a very low frequency, all of this evil that surrounds us. And it's nice to have folks like yourself, Jeff, Zach, you guys are bringing light to the darkness, and there needs to be more of that. Douglas is a fine example. He certainly is at a different level as far as exposing certain agendas and very passionate about what he believes in. And it seems like things happen for a reason, and I'm certainly glad that we were able to get together today as well. I mean, Jeff, what do you think is going to be the next level? Do you feel that we're going to continue to slowly be in this kind of slow boil pot frog, put the frog in the pot, slowly cook it, doesn't realize he's being cooked? Or are you seeing something really big that's going to happen here soon? I'm wondering your opinion on that as well, Zach.
I want to touch on a couple things you said, because you mentioned again the frequency and the vibration, because coming from music, that's everything for me.
Right.
And we're talking about gematria on one side, and I haven't talked a lot about this because it's more applicable to my guitar students, but I'm sitting here with this page staring at me because I got a Skype lesson later today with a student over in Japan. And what I'm teaching, the way I teach my students how to play, is sacred geometry. Everything is sacred geometry. Everything is from gematria or numbers. And this is so interesting. I'd love to sometime teach everyone how music really works. Just to break it down really quickly, every chord I can teach any student in one lesson using sacred geometry, which this has to be the musical equivalent of what Zach is doing, all right? I can teach them in one lesson how to play every pop chord comes from one three-note triad. Every major and minor, and it's literally just moving fingers, and I will blow your mind on just that. Then every jazz chord, all the sharp 9/13, all the trippy chords that you will hear in more sophisticated forms of music come from one four-note diminished cluster. Okay? Again, the Freemasons made up the musical scale. Do you see how this all connects? It's a holistic, the whole music industry is a psyop. You got to get on this cat, Mark Devlin, and his book, Musical Truth, that I had on my show, because he's another one, in our tribe of music without boundaries, truth tellers, seekers. So everything is connected somehow. And as I listen to Zach, and even Zach and I haven't talked a lot about this sacred geometry and how I teach my students, but the more I learn about what Zach is doing with numbers and the way I see how it relates to the sacred geometry and how I teach music to my students. I mean, imagine if you can come in and learn how to make every chord in one lesson, that saves you 30 years. So you see the power of what these people have at their disposal, these secrets, and no teacher ever told me this. I was lucky from one teacher, okay, that gave me this secret, because this guy had a stroke and he had to learn how to play guitar all over again. He was in his 60s, and this epiphany came to him, and he figured out sacred geometry, much probably how Zach stumbled upon gematria, okay? I'm still putting together this puzzle of how it's all connected. We all are. But what I like to bring it down, and I think the most meaningful thing that Zach and I are intent when we go on these shows is, and I can kind of encapsulate a lot of questions that you asked that we didn't even answer about, from the other side, and even when people talk about aliens, my motto on that stuff is, when an alien walks up or a reptilian walks up and bites my face off or shakes my hand, or God comes up and I have to, reckon with that, I'll deal with that when the time comes. But just with the intel we've shared in this very show, and there's a lot here, we dropped a lot of truth, and I know it's a lot to swallow, but just what we've shared with you right in the space of this, dealing with the here and now and in this moment, what are the practical things we can do? And for me, it seems so easy, but I don't know why it would be so hard for all the men that hear this to just wake up and boycott fake sports. Because just take the merchandising budget alone, okay? For all football, basketball, baseball, cycling, all the way across the board, Olympics, that people are throwing down the toilet. Do you see every dollar that we make, they're taken back through taxes, or they're taken back through their fake exploits that you said a great line on the show, everyone is addicted to everything wrong. Zach, you said it in the show last night, and that's the thing, but our fear is even exposing this, and when people hear the gematria and they know the stuff is fake, when people figured out the WWE was fake, and the Sheik and Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant, they still filled stadiums.
But I saw Hulk Hogan bleed, man. That's got to be real.
He worked out at the gym in Chatsworth where I worked out. I mean, they're just cats like everybody else. And that's, you see what I'm saying? We got to focus on what we can do and the actions that we can take to immediately, like this week, like right now, if everyone turned off every sporting event and never watched another, never bought another ticket to an event, never patronized that whole arena of exploitation and lies and cheating and corruption. And we have friends that are naming our children after Kobe Bryant. I mean, it's just sports has fucked men up and the male entity up, on such a deep level. And why it's so hard for them to just let go of that, I don't get it. And then take that across to the entertainment industry. If you're going to watch movies for the predictive programming and the messaging that they're sending us, and so we can use, because they're giving us the roadmaps. What Zach is showing you, it's when we get off this Skype line, there's nothing more we can, we could draw you a map, put on a puppet show, but the puppet show was already on last night on the debates, So it's all right here. We can take just this much intel. Even the thing with where people don't understand what's going down in Hollywood and why, let's just count this year: Glenn Frey, David Bowie, Prince, Vanity, Natalie Cole, keep going. And all along the sports arena, from where do you start? Kids, are they doing it at the high school level, Zach? The sacrificing before the kids go up to the college level. It's through the whole
there's
sports.
Instances where we've seen the players sign with the big schools, and then a parent drops dead, a grandfather drops dead the same day. Yeah, that's when it starts.
So if it's hard for people to wrap their mind around that, we just gave you two totally juxtaposed, Prince is as huge as they come, and then you've got Nick Menza, that whole story we just laid out for you right there, and then you can go watch Zach's video about it, and he's got videos about Dimebag and John Lennon, who on the same day. You did a video on Natalie Cole for me as well, Zach. I mean, you have videos on almost every celebrity sacrifice, sports sacrifice, and I know it's hard to understand, but if you understand how the Zionist religion works, and the one number that we should definitely get in and talk about is, the Baba Kamal 113, because that's what it all boils down to, is we're living in a fake construct that's been built around us. It's lies. 113 is the number of deception. Green screen, you can take it from there, Zach. Just start riffing on 113, because we're living in a lie, and it seems people are content with that.
Yeah, so what Jeff's saying, the word mainstream equals 113, the word dishonest equals 113, the word perjury is 113, green screen 113, Baba Kamal 113a in the Talmud says it's okay for somebody who's Jewish to lie to somebody who is not. And the people who are ruling over us, they truly are playing God with lies and deception. And I don't think it's a coincidence that in our English language, the word God is a 3-letter word like the word lie, and they both sum to 26, this very special number. Today we're reading about a bombing in Germany by the numbers that happened on the 26th, just before the 26-year anniversary of the reunification of East and West Germany. That's the way the story is being emphasized. So, you know, if you learn this language of gematria and you decode the headlines, you'll see how often mainstream outlets from CNN to NBC to CBS to Fox News, all of them, BBC, all of them, they'll all code 113 in their headlines as they roll out the propaganda. And they do this multiple times a day, every single day. And you see that this numbers into words is a very real ritual for these people. And you know, they don't play around with it. They do it. They practice it like it's their religion. If anyone has the time to go to my YouTube video and see the decoding I just did on the plaques outside the Burlington Lodge, I show how every single name on every single plaque corresponds perfectly in gematria with that lodge. And that's not a coincidence. These people name themselves accordingly, rename themselves. I have a feeling a lot of these Freemasons, when they become part of the network, even change their birthdays so they line up by the numbers.
And when Zach says down to the detail, we're talking down to the length of a video on CNN that's going to be 1 minute and 13 seconds. Think about it this way. And we've talked about a couple great gematria movies, but one of the most endearing movie characters in history is Dustin Hoffman's character in Rain Man. This is what they're like, but take away the cuteness. Everything that he did was about the numbers. He had to do this at a certain time, the obsession. This is what we're talking about. And they're putting it right there in that movie, and look how charming they made it. It's just so cute how they do their gematria on us.
Right. There was one thing I wanted to bring up from the beginning of the show. You brought up the 27 Club and dead musicians at a young age. Do we have time for a little note on that?
Oh, yeah. And real quick, just want to say also, before I forget, the movie Knowing that you brought up earlier, there's 2 huge events that were portrayed in the movie Knowing, and it was the Fukushima disaster as well as the Gulf oil spill. I just wanted to
Which was on March 11th, or 113, 11/3.
See?
Hello.
That's a great movie, Knowing. Everyone should watch that. And Pi is another great gematria movie, you know.
Great. Absolutely. I'll definitely check out Pi. I haven't seen that one. Yeah, tell us, Zach.
Yeah, so just there's a lot I could do on the 27 Club, but I'm just going to do 2 from my city up here, Seattle, Washington, Jimi Hendrix and Kurt Cobain. Both of these men were born on dates where they had birth numerology of 27. And if you go through the 27 Club and calculate the birth numerology, almost every single person in that club has 27 birth numerology. Jimi Hendrix himself was also born on November 27th, so he was born on the 27th day of the month. Jimi Hendrix died on a date with a life lesson number of 44. The word kill equals 44. Kurt Cobain died exactly 44 days after his 27th birthday. The name Cobain also sums to 44 like kill. For all of the 27 Club, it's the same pattern, dead by these same numbers, either 38 or 44. And with regards to the numbers 38 and 44, in almost every celebrity sacrifice, suspicious death you hear about, the number 38 or 44 is there. Prince just passed this year on the 44th parallel. With regards to Seattle being a rock city, you know, in the early 90s, it was pretty much the center of the rock universe. Seattle, again, is on the 47th parallel. The word rock equals 47. The word radio equals 47. The word pop equals 47. The words, you know, the names that we know in this world, the dates, when you take the numbers behind the words, the numerology of the dates, you see how often it comes back to this certain group of numbers that are connected to tragedy and death and killing. And for anyone out there who's going to apply this to their name and go, oh my God, my name sums to 44 or 38, like I said in the beginning of the show, there's good and bad with all of these numbers. So the numbers aren't just about death and killing, but they're used often in these rituals because they serve that purpose. So just for anyone out there who's listening, who applies this, don't worry if your name sums to 44 or 38. There's positives too, but all throughout history, people have been sacrificed by these same numbers again and again. I could go into greater details about the deaths of Jimi Hendrix and Kurt Cobain, but I want people to just take away that set right there, that they both died by the number 44, that so many people have died by. Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X, both dead by the number 44. Both of their names summed to 93, both dead at age 39. You look at the history of every president to die in office connected to the number 44. The first president to die in office died 1 month into his term. William Henry Harrison, dead on April 4th. The first presidential assassination, Abraham equals 44, so does the nickname Honest Abe. and so many more. JFK, the last president to be assassinated, was killed in the middle of Dealey Plaza on 11/22, 11 plus 22, 33, named after a 33rd degree Freemason. JFK was the 35th president. The word Catholic equals 35. He's the only Catholic president. He was also the 44th term president, and for the 44-year anniversary of his assassination when Barack Obama was running for president, ABC released a new story. They said it had never before been released, how JFK narrowly avoided being assassinated in Chicago just 2 weeks before he was killed. And I thought that was real suspicious when that headline came out about JFK 44 years later in the time of the race for the 44th president, where Obama was from Illinois. So, you know, there's a reason that Obama's the 44th president, and I think it is a major tribute to the deaths of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr., who both died by the number 44. The Civil Rights Act happened in 64. Civil rights in Gematria sums to 64. Obama was elected the 44th president 44 years after the Civil Rights Act in 2008. Anyway, just sharing some more knowledge.
Wow. I'll tell you, Zach, I certainly appreciate you coming on here. Jeff, it's just been a pleasure to speak with you as well. I know that we've gone past the hour, and I mean, I'd pick your guys' brain for 24 hours if I could. Maybe we'll have a chance to speak with you again sometime. But before we close out tonight, I definitely want to recommend that our audience check out Jeff Young. I mean, this guy has just an awesome channel. Now it's on several platforms, right, Jeff? How do they get access to your radio programs? Because you talk to a lot of wonderful people.
It's super easy. Spreaker, Spreaker, is a wonderful broadcast network. We also have Tommy Chong and Susan Stop the Insanity Powders also on our network. A bunch of great shows of every different ilk on any topic that you can name. You can find the radio show. The easiest way to listen is just jeffyoungjams.com. Takes you straight to my Spreaker, 5 years worth of episodes, and I started speaking Truth to Power September 10th last year, so we're 1 year of that. Every year I just watched September 11th pass, and I'd like to direct people to my Patreon wall because I just premiered a video. It's a song that I wrote 3 years before 9/11 with a Brazilian singer-songwriter that I was working with, and it's, I don't like to talk about premonitions, but it basically describes the entire day in colorful detail and horrifying detail. So every year I wanted to make a slideshow. I've had this song on my album, and I've known that I wanted to put it out there. So this year I put a slideshow that people might be interested to check out. That's at patreon.com/JeffYoung. And the easiest way to find me and all the stuff that I do with my music is just jeffyounggtr.com. And that'll take you to the radio show, to my YouTube channels, to the Facebooks, to the whole social media horizon. And Zach's on our show. He's a regular. He's been on about 1 million times, and we hope to have him back 1 million times. He's a regular correspondent and Gematria expert. And again, we didn't get to talk enough about his trip, you know, because he lives in Washington, to the mall and what he learned there. But I definitely recommend checking out his Free to Find Truth blog and his YouTube channel. The latest videos he did up there when he went to the Freemason Lodge are definitely riveting and revelatory. And so thanks everyone for listening to the interview. My show's on Monday nights, by the way, my radio show, Monday nights at 7/11. And speaking of the Gematria, here's an example. When I first met Zach, you know, when I originally picked that time, my band was called Souls on 11, my project in Los Angeles. Everything was 11. It was a humorous nod to Spinal Tap and Nigel Tufnell and his Marshall amps go to 11, but my amps go to 11. And then, of course, the 7-Eleven, it's easy sometimes for people to remember stuff like that. So we just started using 7-Eleven as a number. Now, when Zach started coming on the show, all his listeners and followers started commenting, why is his show starting at 7-Eleven? What's that all about? You know, and I asked Jack, should I change the time of my show? And we agreed that, you know, again, you can use these numbers. You know, if they can use them against us, we can use them against them. So I kind of use some of the numbers to punk them if I can. And as a matter of fact, if I can give a shout out to subscribe not only to my YouTube channel for my music, Jeff Young Tube on YouTube, but our Music Without Boundaries. I'm about to drop a video. It's called 33 Again and Again and Again and Again. And for the entire, I could have used a 10-minute song. I was going to use the police murder by numbers, but I'll get a copyright strike. So I don't know what music or what I'm going to do, but I've collected a collage of how many times the powers that be put 33 before our eyes. And it's going to blow your mind and just sit back. Maybe I should do it in silence. So you just sit there, you know, dumbfounded in silence and see. But that'll be coming to my YouTube channel here in the next couple weeks as well. So thanks for having us on your show, and we hope to come back because we could riff like this all day. There's so much, and I know we dropped a lot of intel, but hopefully people listen to a show like this again and again, and they can pick out all the parts. And the last thing to leave you with is we gave a lot of stuff, and the easiest thing is to boycott TV altogether, fake sports, you know, don't support the NWO agenda, and it's easy to see, it's easy to spot when it's out there. Fake news, and if you see fake news happen in your town, like Zach, you know, if you see it happening, go there. If you're near, because they're bussing these people in, the Black Lives Matter people, they're, you know, the people in Charlotte, we didn't go into that too deep. They bus those people in to Charlotte. And I just played there on my last tour, and that's a beautiful town.
Oh, yeah, it's gorgeous out there.
But all the banks are there, so they had to get busy down there, stir up a little shit.
It's really amazing the way that they can orchestrate these things. And you're right, people do need to go on scene and get footage themselves. If I was close to one of those areas, I'd definitely be doing that. But we'll be spreading our wings here pretty soon. So, Jeff, you are awesome. I certainly can't wait to talk to you again. And Zach, you are absolutely incredible as well. And I do want to give another shout out to your YouTube channel. Now, if somebody just types in Zachary K. Hubbard in a search engine, it'll show up. But it doesn't look like you have a specific URL to go with your YouTube channel. Just type in Zachary Hubbard. Would that be the best way to do it?
Yeah, Zachary K. Hubbard will pull up my YouTube channel. And if you want my blog, search Free to Find Truth. The address is freetofindtruth.blogspot.com, but Free to Find Truth should pull it up. And on Wednesday nights, I have the radio program as well on Truth Frequency Radio, the Gematria Effect, which starts at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 9 p.m. Eastern, and goes for 3 hours. That's a caller show. So if you want to call in and ask me questions, that's the place to do it.
And I moved my show from Wednesdays to Mondays just so I could listen to Zach, and that's how we truthers work together.
Thanks, Jeff.
It's so important to work together and not infight amongst each other. It's amazing if you have a YouTube channel and you get a few thousand subscribers, you're really doing your best to wake people up because of people's different opinions. You read through the comments section, and half the people that are supposedly trying to make a difference are just fighting them. But at the same time, there's a lot of productive stuff there as well. And folks, go to leakproject.com, become a contributing member. Also, our YouTube channel, youtube.com/clandestine Time Lord. We just broke 50,000 subscribers. So thanks for everybody that's been a part of that. And one last thing I want to leave you with, folks, that have a chance to listen to this podcast. Be the change you want to see. This is Rex Bear. Talk to you soon. Zachary K. Hubbard, Josh Young, Megadeth, Gematria, Illuminati, Secret Society, Chaos Code, Prophecy, Saturn Cult, 27 Club, latest project. Ladies and gentlemen, do I have a treat for you? Tonight we have Jeff Young and Zachary Hubbard with us. Now, I've had multiple requests to get Zach on the show, and the way that this was all put together yesterday, in my opinion, it is definitely meant to be. We had Douglas on a few days ago. Douglas reached out to Jeff, and then Jeff reached out to me, and now this is all being put together for you, the listeners at Leak Project. You guys, it's a real honor to speak with you. How the heck are you?
Doing great.
This is Jeff, and I'm quite festive. Zach and I just did a radio show last evening on Music Without Boundaries, so I think we're all warmed up for you this morning.
Great. You know, I just got done listening to that interview, and it was almost 3 hours, and I was just on edge the entire time. You guys definitely have a way to present information to the table. Now, Zach, I found out about you a few months ago because I was getting requests to have you on the show, and I listened to some of your work, and the way that you broke down names to numbers and symbology and patterns, I find that quite incredible. You've definitely got a knack for that. Jeff, if you would, real quick also for our audience, you were with Megadeth for a while, huge fan, and please give our listeners just a little taste into what your life was like back then and where you're at now.
Well, the most appropriate thing for our discussion, you know, related to Megadeth is if your truth-seeking listeners want to just Google the Megadeth discography and look at the album covers, because there's a ton of predictive programming there. And if you start with the album covers and then you want to dive deeper into the lyrics, all the way back to Peace Sells But Who's Buying, So Far So Good So What, the album I played on, Vic Rattlehead on the cover looks quite akin to how we're seeing the police dressing in their new UN One World Order police garb as of late, and all the way through their latest album, Dystopia, which is totally 1984 Orwellian. But, just from an experiential standpoint, I'm a pretty, at the time I was pretty green. I grew up in Dayton, Ohio, inspired by all the musicians from that state and my city directly. The Ohio Players were from Dayton, Zap Band. Rick Derringer was close by. Chrissy Hine from Columbus or Cleveland, I believe. And I'd been locked in my room practicing, 4 to 14 hours a day, since I picked up the guitar, and I was a musician my whole life. So between doing a radio show as a kid in my bedroom and playing musician, I was pretty green. So to move out to Hollywood and attend Musicians Institute, and 4 years later, circumstances led me to that opportunity. So it was very much like the male version of Dorothy and Toto in The Wizard of Oz, except I was talking to my guitar. My guitar was Toto, so...
That's incredible. And to where you are now, we were speaking yesterday. I said, I slept in. You said, hey, I usually get up early. I said, wow, I didn't know rock stars do that. You said, I'm the anti-rock star. And I thought about that, and I'm looking at what you're doing as far as looking for the truth, bringing people like Zach on your show, and really trying to expose agendas that you feel are important, and I can certainly see why. And so I think that kind of resonated with me when you said anti-rock star, because if you really think about that deeply, man, I'll tell you, the lifestyle of somebody in that industry, the rich and famous rock stars, I look at the 27 Club, people that had such a powerful impact on society, and at the age of 27, bang, they're toast. These weird deaths and circumstances, I'm sure we'll get into that. But do you feel like when you saw those albums, were there handlers essentially? I mean, were there people behind the scenes like in suits that said, okay, you need to take that line out and add this line because it's going to meet our agenda? Or did it all just kind of happen because of maybe something behind the scenes, like a spiritual influence or a demonic, I guess you could say, or both, all of the above?
You got to keep in mind that when I was in the band, this is like 88, 89 and a little beyond. And we were all a lot more naive. And you can obviously go back, you can go all the way back to, books like 1984 and Childhood's End, etc. And it's always been there, but within our band, there was no discussion of it. There was no awareness of it. If anyone was aware, it would have been the leader of that band, if you know what I'm saying. And at the time, he was so inebriated and intoxicated, I don't think he was aware. There was no handlers around at the time. But in hindsight, all your listeners have to do is go on YouTube and Google Dave Mustaine, Alex Jones. Those two are pretty tight mates this day and age, like vacationing buddies, close. So that's to be of concern, at least from where I sit. But those two alone in a room together, no good could come from that.
I also find it interesting. I do remember also, it seemed like a couple years ago, didn't he go on Alex's show? And then I haven't really kept track of Alex Jones since then because I've been doing my own thing. I mean, once in a while his stuff will pop up. But, one of the things I've also noticed in the alternative news community is you have to really wonder what certain people's agendas are. And I do my best personally here at the Leak Project to be as neutral as possible. As a journalist, I just want to give the audience a chance to make the decisions for themselves. I mean, I've got things that I'm passionate about, and I speak about that at length sometimes. But really, it seems like you have to be so careful now who to trust. And when you see people out there that tend to push certain agendas a lot and don't come up with solutions, it can certainly make you question things. And Zach, when I was listening to the interview that you had last night with Jeff on his program, and you guys were getting into the false flags, the numbers, the dates, the names, I thought to myself, this is almost so finely orchestrated that could this be some type of system where they've got a computer program, a supercomputers, and it's connected to the media, and they know what it all means. So they put in these certain scenarios that they want to happen, and then all of a sudden, bang, there's this fake false flag at this specific date that equates to this certain equation that they're throwing in our face, etc.
I think your theory or speculation is probably correct. The supercomputer and plotting things out that way. And I have a feeling that a lot of these things that are plotted out, they've been plotted out for many decades in advance, and we're living out an ongoing agenda each day.
Do you think that maybe the computer has taken over? Like there's some type of AI system interface or whatever that's literally now controlling us, similar to the Matrix?
Sure, it very well could be. I mean, that's what the movie essentially Space Odyssey 2001 was, that came out in 1968, the same year 911 was made the national emergency dialing code, the same year World Trade Center construction began, same year George W. Bush graduated from Yale in Skull and Bones, same year MLK was assassinated, Bobby Kennedy.
Let's get into that. Do you think these numbers can be used for good and bad? Or when you look at specific events and particular numbers, do you look at just the negative, or, you know, because it seems like we're in this dualistic universe, right? You've got the yin and the yang. And I wonder sometimes if these numbers and dates are being taken over by these, you know, sociopaths or psychopaths for their agendas. But at the beginning of time, those numbers could have been used for good and bad.
Yeah, absolutely. You said it well again. I mean, this world is all about duality, and I think with all of these numbers, there's a good and a bad side. In my research, I'm mostly exposing the wrongdoers, so I focus on the negative side, and I get a lot of questions like, oh my gosh, I decoded my own name and I have this number. And I say, well, look, that's not a bad thing. Don't worry. I'm just showing how these people are using these numbers routinely in their negative propaganda. But just because your name sums to that or you have that birth numerology, it's not a negative quality towards yourself.
Right. That's a good way to put it. Absolutely. I could appreciate that. And how did you get into this, man? Because you've definitely got a knack for it, Zach. I mean, you break these things down like a computer, literally like a supercomputer.
Well, these people are so repetitive, so that's why I can do it so efficiently now. Like 15 minutes before I jumped on the radio, I turned on CNN and I saw that there was another bombing in Germany, so I decoded it on my blog in about 3 minutes flat, and I made a video in another 10 minutes, and I popped on for the radio show just in time. So, you know, I've become really efficient at this because I've been doing it for 3 years, but how I discovered it was essentially just looking for the truth for more than a decade. And, you know, I was 18 years old when September 11th happened, and I saw it as bogus propaganda, a lie from the moment it was presented. And ever since that day, I've been trying to figure out what the truth is of our media. Because even before September 11th happened, I didn't like the media. I saw it as negative, as fear-mongering, as something not worth watching. All you were going to get from it is some anxiety at best, worried about some new illness or threat out there. So anyway, I've always watched the news with a skeptical eye, trying to see what they're really up to, how they're really contriving their news stories. And over the years of just paying attention to the news, I noticed how often numbers such as 33 and 47 were shown in stories. A shooter's age is 47, or this person was killed and they were 47, or this shooter was 33 years old. Just from looking at the news and the reporting, I noticed this pattern for years, and I thought, what is it with these numbers? What are these numbers all about? And, you know, just doing other research, reading books, gathering knowledge. From the time of September 11th on, I turned into truly a book nerd, a researcher, trying to figure out more and more truth about this world and who's running things and what's really going on here. And so I learned about Freemasonry along the way, and I learned about things such as Euclid's 47th problem, which is important to the Freemasons for how to build a structure and establish a foundation. So I started to say, oh, okay, there's things to the number 47. Well, it was around the time of the Sandy Hook shooting that they kept putting up that picture of Adam Lanza with that anorexic face and that crazy shaggy haircut, and they kept reporting that he was 112 pounds, and I kept thinking, why does it matter that he was 112 pounds? And that sounds awfully bizarre. What man is 112 pounds? I mean, that is a really frail man, and they're saying he was toting around all these weapons with his 112-pound body?
Oh, well, yeah, anyway, he was so blasted out of his mind that he was not only able to take out all those people in the theater by himself, smash down a door from the outside by himself, but also heavily booby-trap his apartment, all while he was just completely blasted out of his mind.
Well, sure. I think you might have confused James Egan Holmes there, which is another one. Adam Lanza is the Sandy Hook shooter. James Egan Holmes is the Aurora shooter.
Thank you for correcting me on that.
Yeah, exactly. It's the same thing, you know. And so
it's hard to keep track. There's so many by now.
Right. We've been bombarded with so many of these stories and crazy-looking shooters. And anyhow, I was just trying to do all this research to figure out, like, okay, if they're making up these stories and they're giving us phony pictures and they're giving us bogus names, is there some ritual to this? Is there something about names I don't know? Is there something about names and numbers? So just in doing these searches, trying to find answers, just one day the word gematria popped up, and I said, oh, what's that? I never heard of that word. So I read a little bit about gematria, and I said, this is pretty interesting. And when I applied it to the Sandy Hook news story, I saw right away that Sandy Hook equaled 112, like the supposed weight of this shooter. And so I read a little bit more about 112, and I saw that 112 was the alt dialing code for 911, and I thought, that's interesting, 911, 112, the nation that had September 11th. The majority of the countries in this world use 112 for their emergency dialing code. This past year in Turkey on January 12th, they had the big bombing there, and you saw on TV all the vehicles driving around with a 112 on the side of them. Anyway, so this is how I stumbled onto gematria, just research and looking for answers, and maybe even a little bit of dumb luck that the word came across. And once I found it and began to apply it, the rest is history, because I realized in record time that this was no coincidence, and this really is what was being done to us with all of our propaganda news stories.
Absolutely, and I'm glad you brought up the correction there on James Holmes. Thank you. It's funny because I remember that event too, where there was a music video by Lil Wayne that came out prior to or previous to that, where he portrayed, it was either 12 or 13 skeletons in a movie theater, and he was jumping around in there. And at 3 minutes and 42 seconds of the video, if you listen to that, he says "going deaf," and it almost sounds like he says "gun death," in my opinion. So I was wondering, man, is there some type of pre-programming there? Because the amount of skeletons in that theater correlates to the amount of people that were supposedly killed in the theater, correct?
Right. Absolutely. And that's how they do it. I mean, they're running the show. They run entertainment, they run media, they run government, and they love to give us their